This week, we feature the second in our series of New Mexico Makers, presented in conjunction with the national PBS program Makers, Women Who Make America. Ladonna Harris, founder of the Albuquerque-based Americans for Indian Opportunity, has devoted her life to building coalitions that create change. Her accomplishments at Americans for Indian Opportunity are legion, from helping the people of Taos get back their sacred Taos Blue Lake to connecting American Indians to Native people half a world away. Here's NMIF correspondent Sarah Gustavus with New Mexico maker Ladonna Harris.
You're the founder of Americans for Indian Opportunity. You've done a lot of political work over your career, but this organization is 40 years old, headquartered here in Albuquerque. Why did you start Americans for Indian Opportunity?
I guess one of the biggest shocks to me as a Native American going to Washington, how little the general public knows about us or understands us. So that half of our AIO life, Americans for Indian Opportunities life, was to educate the people who were decision makers. And we formed a way of doing it, we call it Indian 101, and we're still doing it for a lot of people.
What were your early career ambitions?
I had a desire to become a librarian, even in high school. I worked in two different high school librarians as a librarian, and I just thought I love books. But then I got married my senior year in high school. Fred was at the University of Oklahoma at the time, and so we had to both work to put him through college and through law school. So my ambition, I guess, turned out to be both political, and then when he was off before he was in the United States Senate, he was in the State Senate. So while he was off in Oklahoma City, I would get involved with all of these, integrating our hometown and then organizing Oklahomans for Indian Opportunity. Those two things seemed to go together quite comfortably. So it just gave me another forum of using his being in office to have some influence. When we started Oklahomans for Indian Opportunity, I visited all the schools to see if we can, because we had such a large dropout rate of Indian children. We still have that, still is an issue, but we were able to turn that around from 75 to 35%, and the Comanches particularly have even a lower percentage than that on dropout rates. So that we made an impact with our little efforts, and there wasn't a book to go by, wasn't anybody experimenting in this area, because Indian boarding schools were such a disaster, and the whole philosophy was always presented as an either or. If you're going to become educated, you had to give up your language and who you were. And if you became a Christian, you had to give up your ceremony, your dance, and so that it was always an either or. And when someplace in my life I decided it was not an either or, I could do both. And so that's really what gave me the courage to take on, or having that philosophy that I could question anybody in authority. It gave me the strength to say, well, they're not always right.
Was there a time when you started to see your own identity and your own potential to make a difference politically and with your own political activism?
I did. When I helped to organize the Women's Political Caucus, I was a founder along with Gloria Steinem and Bella Abzug and Betty Friedan, all of those great women. And so I started finding my voice outside. And then when I was working with the Urban League and with other minority groups, I had a voice. And I was a great admirer of, now I can't think of his name, but he started the Urban League and the Common Cause, which still is in existence, and so I served on those boards, and so I had my voice outside of that. I turned out to because of Sarge Shriver asking me to testify for the funding of the war on poverty in the House of Representatives, and so I asked Fred would he mind if I did that? And he said, no, just don't embarrass me. So I did it, and turned out to be, I was the first wife to ever testify in Congress. So you just find those roles to play, and I hope to think that I made some difference. And then I would find these avenues of participating, and so I was very, very active in Washington and many organizations. When I got there and saw that women who were in government couldn't travel because it was not acceptable to go unchaperoned, can you imagine, a woman that was in government, and so they couldn't climb the ladder, the federal ladder even, and so I thought that was so grossly unfair. That's really what motivated me to get into the women's movement, because when you see discrimination in one form, you can't accept it in another. So that's how I got involved that way.
How important is it for Native women to have a voice in the women's movement?
It's very important. It was very difficult in those early stages to have women of color to be a part of the women's movement. Culturally, there was cultural differences. It was difficult, and I thought I could bridge that gap, but I never did very well. So we started a Women of Color organization, and that brought a lot of people rose to. Then it was more integrated organizations. The women's movement became much more integrated. But we are making a difference, and the women are doing it as well as the men. That we've made such transition since the 60s to where we are now, both economically and socially and politically.
Where do you get your confidence from?
I'm not sure. I think I really think it comes from my Comanche culture. Though my father was Irish in the Great Depression, like a lot of Oklahomans, he went to California to try to find a job, and my mother went to work for the Indian Hospital, and I was reared by my Comanche grandparents, and I really think it came from them. That sense of identity, of self, I think that's something that tribal America has, that you have a sense of belonging to something bigger than yourself, and you belong to the United States too, but you belong to your tribe, and then you're a United States citizen. And so that sense of self comes from that background, and then being involved in these things and working with other people to move and organize themselves so they can move in a new direction. Those few accomplishments gives you a little more confidence to be outspoken and do a little bit more.
And what's your advice to other young women, especially young Native women who are maybe just getting started on a career path?
Well, be sure to know your tribal culture, and it's not an either or. Some people say we live in two different worlds, but I think that makes you schizophrenic if you try to live like that. You can't leave your culture, on the res and come into town and transform, try to play two different characters all the time. That bring the culture with you and help share it and make it a part of you.
Ladonna Harris, thank you for sitting down with us today.
Our series continues in next week's program. Sarah Gustavus speaks with the first Hispanic woman governor in the United States, New Mexico's Susana Martinez.
Local Makers Initiative is funded by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, a private corporation funded by the American people.